My name is Wilson Jermaine Heredia, and I'm talking to Rabbi Sol Solomon at Dave's Gone By.
Oh, shalom, damn it! This is your pal, Rabbi Sol Solomon, here with you on the radio. Oh, I'm flying. Look at me, I'm a Jew. Maybe you are, maybe you, yes. I'm flying because we're going to be talking about a show called Pedro Pan. No, it's not a Spanish translation of Peter Pan. It's a musical that they're going to be doing in July as part of the New York Musicals Festival. It's all about immigrant children, so it's very much in the news. But we're going to be talking to somebody who's in it. Somebody who won a Tony Award for being in one of the iconic modern musicals of modern times, Rent. He's also been on Broadway in La Cage aux Folles. He's done some other off-Broadway work. So I can't wait to talk to Wilson Jermaine Heredia in the neighborhood. And here he is with us now. Hola and shalom, Wilson.
Hola and shalom to you too, Rabbi.
Now, I may have mispronounced. See, your last name starts with an H. Is it Heredia or Heredia?
It's actually both correct. If you're pronouncing it in English, it's Heredia. If it's in Spanish, it's Heredia. So you actually said it correctly the first time.
Yeah, but that just makes it more confusing. Which do you have a preference?
Heredia. Heredia with an H.
Heredia. Okay, so we'll get hereditary here with Wilson Jermaine. So this is really exciting. You've got a new musical that you are in. It's at the Musicals Festival starting on July 10th. It's only 5 performances, but people can see it right in Midtown at the Acorn Theater running from the 10th through the 14th of July. Tell us, please, about Pedro Pan.
Yes, I'm very, very excited to be part of this project, Pedro Pan. It is about the Cuban Revolution and the displaced children that were sent to the United States during the time in order to protect them from the soldiers from being conscripted into the army. It's the story of the heartache and the pain and all the complications and the ins and the outs that come with that. It's very heartbreaking, but also a great time. It's also informative. It does everything that a musical should do. You should leave with a feeling that you've been informed and you've been entertained.
I wish people would leave that from my sermons, but they never do. It's kind of sad there. You've been rehearsing this show, this musical, Pedro Pan. As you've been doing it, of course, in the news all over the place, everybody's talking about the border and the immigrants and the children and the camps. Since reading the script first, probably months ago, from doing it now, are there moments in rehearsal when you come to a line and you go, oh boy, that's a headline today, that you didn't half a year ago?
Yeah, oh, definitely. I mean, there are some parts more around the beginning where he is at immigration and how he's treated, more at immigration when he's in Cuba. But also, it's a very, very weird time that as much as we talk about protecting children, when it all comes down to it, when the cards are down, people really don't care about children. They use them as a weapon, something in order to get something done. It's just very, very, very timely what's going on. And so funny, even more so, last year, it didn't leave a dry eye in the audience. But this year, with everything that's been going on, it's definitely one of those things that makes you think. And great thing is that the story is through the perspective of this child, and it shows you the human side. Because very much in this society right now, we like to diminish people's humanity, so it makes it a lot easier to abuse them. In this, it actually humanizes all the characters and all the parts of it, all the sides of what's going on. So hopefully, even with this small little show, I hope that, very much like Rent, that it's the little voice that eventually everyone catches on.
By the way, I'm going to make the worst pun that you have heard in the past couple of weeks right now. You used the word diminish, and this is important to that show. You don't want to see things diminished. And yet, your ancestry is Dominishkin.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's horrible.
Very nice.
What does it mean to you? I know we're flipping gears right here, but what does your Dominican ancestry mean to you? How does it manifest in your family life and your daily life?
Well, I was born here. You can say that I'm actually more American than I am Dominican now, since I was born here. But I didn't really start learning English until I was around 6 years old. to American culture was weird, and I didn't realize that being Dominican was something different until I was told that in school. And there are some scenes in this show also where the kids are cruel because of where Pedro comes from. For me, but being of Dominican culture, I feel that every single day. It's just one of those things that you kind of carry in your soul. There's the music, there's the food, there's the people, there's the way that you treat other people. So for me, it's a very, very important thing to keep that, because it is part of my identity. It's not all of my identity, but it's a huge part of my identity. It's my foundations.
That makes complete sense. Are your parents gone? Are they still?
No, they're still alive, thank God. They are still alive, and they have moved back to Dominican Republic. But they let me know how difficult it was when they were coming up here before I was born and after I was born, and I was able to see some of the first-hand experiences that they were going through, how they had to learn the language, the kind of jobs that they were able to get, how much they struggled, how important family was, how important family still is, and everything that you do is for family. Again, very much like how everything's going on right now, the political and social climate, that people wonder, well, why are they putting these kids in the middle of all this? Why take these kids and put them in danger? Why sacrifice all that? Because everything that you do is for your children. It's just one of those things that we should all remember. It doesn't matter what culture you're from. At the end of the day, it's elevating the next generation.
One thing about elevating the generation is, despite your parents' struggles and having to take certain jobs because that's all they could get, it sounds like they encouraged you to go into one of the most unsafe, quote-unquote, careers of all, which is music and also the arts.
Well, they did. They inadvertently inspired me to do that because it was all around us. My father always had instruments around the house. There were percussion instruments, string instruments. But they wanted me to become a doctor, and so that's what I had my eyes set on doing. But I knew from a very young age that the performer was what I was going to be, and as the universe would have it, it put me in the right place at the right time, and I was prepared for it.
Well, did you study theater in college, or what? Or were you in med school?
I didn't go to med school. I actually went to art school when I decided that I was going to go headlong into this career. When I was in my last year of high school, I went to a vocational high school where I came out a medical assistant, and I worked in a couple of hospitals, and I worked in a clinic, and it was one of those things that I absolutely knew that it was time to tell my parents, like, hey, it's time. So after that, I went to Hunter College, and I got into their film and theater program, and so that's what I studied. I did it all on my own, actually. My parents insisted that I pay my way through it, and I did. So I had odd jobs, and so I struggled for it, very much like how my parents struggled for what they have. They encouraged me to do that for myself, and I appreciate it completely for that. It was, in some respects, it could be considered as hard love, but it was the appropriate thing to do, because now I understand what it is to struggle for your own dreams and your own desires and aspirations.
Well, did you do that thing that a lot of actors do when they come out of college and they say, okay, I'm going to be an actor, I'm going to do it, but I give myself 5 years, and if I'm not at least self-supporting in 4.5, then I'll be a secretary, I'll wipe old people's tushies for a living.
When I decided that I was going to be an actor, I claimed it from the very beginning, and I was very fortunate to already have a manager by the time that I was in my first year of Hunter College.
Whoa.
And I received my equity card within the very first semester of being at Hunter College. I was working with Elizabeth Swados in this show called The New Americans. I was in the right place at the right time. I was prepared for it, and the universe said, are you ready for it? Yes, I am, and it threw me headlong into it. So I was one of the very few students in my class that was actually working professionally.
Oh, that's it, because a lot of people would look at you and go, oh, well, nobody's heard of you, until, of course, Rent came along, and that changed everything. I didn't realize that even before Rent, you were getting off-Broadway credits, you were getting, your equity card, working with Elizabeth Swados, for gosh sake. Do you have any memories of her? She seemed like a very special person.
Oh, yes, she was. I can tell you honestly, because it was my first gig, I was terrified of her because she was so serious about the craft and her craft and how she expected her actors to comport themselves. So I was terrified, but I was in awe of her talent and awe of her vision. The one thing that I can take away from it is that she instilled with me a feeling of that this craft is not just for fame. It's not for riches. It's actually if you are in love with the craft itself. And that's all. Not just musical theater, but theater, film, television, that you have to take it seriously. And that's the first thing that you have to keep in mind. And the thing that is most important is that. And that not all projects have to be blockbusters. They don't have to be commercial successes. As long as you actually reach out and communicate something and inform someone. Again, well, for me, it was amazing to be around that kind of talent, and it's inspired me ever since then, and made me feel that, wow, I can write too. I can definitely write too. She has just had a great, fantastic method, and I miss her. I miss her talent, and I miss her presence in the world.
Well, are you on the toilet there? What is that noise behind you there?
Oh, I'm outside. I'm taking a walk outside in my little area. There's a helicopter above.
Oh, I was wondering, there was a gurgling sound. I thought you were flushing, but it's actually a toilet. And you're not in Flushing. You're with us on the radio, on the Dave's Gone By radio program of The Stream with me, Rabbi Sol Solomon, talking to Wilson Jermaine Heredia. We're now up to the point when I think it's you auditioned for something, you were hoping to get it because it was $300 a week, and this little show was at New York Theater Workshop. What was the name of it again?
I think it was called Lease.
Oh, Lease! Yeah, that was, yeah. Which they eventually changed, Jonathan Larson did, to Rent. Do you remember what you did to audition for Rent?
Oh, absolutely. For one, I was dressed in overalls. I had a goatee and combat boots. And I sang Great Balls of Fire and Amazing Grace.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because for one thing, I didn't think of myself as a musical theater actor. I didn't study that. I studied everything separately. And I thought, well, I'm going to give it a go. I don't think that they're going to hire me anyway. I was surprised that they gave me the demo tape so that way I can learn overnight and audition with it the next day. So it was it was a shock. I mean, it threw me into the musical theater world, which I never thought.
Did it occur to you that the role that they gave you of Angel, I mean, did you think you would get Roger, or did you have any idea what you were auditioning for?
Oh, yeah, I knew that I was auditioning for Angel.
Okay.
I knew, but the other job that I had, I wasn't, again, because I didn't really think that I was going to get it. I thought, well, I'm not going to shave for this, I'm not going to go all out of my way for this. If they like what I can do, then I'll make the adjustments later on. And luckily, that's actually what happened.
Did they ever tell you what it was about you that they saw that they said, aha, you?
I don't know. I mean, that you would have to ask them.
Well, I can't ask Jonathan Larson for obvious reasons, but
Well, I do have an interesting story. See, the first day that I was supposed to audition, I overslept and I didn't show up for the very first audition because I was working from 12 to 9 o'clock in the morning. It was a graveyard shift. So I decided I had enough time that I'd be able to take at least a half-hour nap and then go to the audition. Instead, I woke up at, it was 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. My agent at that time, God bless his soul, his name is Fritz Colster, he reamed me in. He really gave me the business. He says, you better show up tomorrow and you better apologize, and this is going to be a big show. And meanwhile, I'm thinking to myself, it's a musical. It was for me, it was I don't see Latin people on Broadway, right? So there's never really going to be, at least not as a principal character. So I was very, very, to say the least, I was sort of lackadaisical about it. It was all right, fine, I'll show up. And then, so next day, they arranged for another audition, and I go. And the first thing I do when I walk in the room, there's Michael Greif, there's Bernie Telsey, there's Marlise, and I say, I'm sorry, I have this job. And Jonathan Larson comes up from behind me, and he said, it's okay, I wasn't here either yesterday because I was working too. And I was like, oh, oh, perfect. And so it definitely sets the stage. He recognized I'm a working guy. He's a working guy too. And yet you're still inspired to pursue your art. And then I started to sing. So I think me not showing up the day before and me being there on that day with Jonathan Larson definitely set it in stone for me. They liked what I did. And when I sang Cover You the next day, it was Cover You and Today for You. The singing in that way, it's very different than using my natural voice.
Right. It's different from Great Balls of Fire also, yeah.
Yeah, completely different. And so I didn't know how to, and mind you, I was not a trained singer. I was self-taught, and so I sang in rock bands in college. So it was a very, very different approach to vocalizing and not musical theater. Tim Weil, the fantastic musical director that he is, he was able to recognize the quality and the tone of my voice, and he said, why don't you sing like little Stevie Wonder? Try that and see if we can get through that. And so I didn't have to worry about how, for those people out there that are familiar with singing terminology, it's a placement. I had to figure out what a placement was. I started, instead of going, live in my house, I'll be your shelter, it became, live in my house, I'll be your shelter.
Oh my God, that's... You get asked to imitate Stevie Wonder at parties?
No, I
you
don't.
Should.
I don't, but I should, I guess, right?
Yeah, I heard it, but I hear also that what you're saying about it's not musical theater singing, which you found the one show at that time that was looking for something very different from musical theater, Belt and chest voice and Ethel Merman and etc. Yeah.
Right. And once you put that into my head, then I was able to navigate that song and navigate all the other songs. And also, I was able to find Angel's voice as well, how he expressed himself vocally. From there on, it was just an evolution over the years. The longer I did it, the more evolved the character became, the more solid and more of a real person he became. Yeah, it was definitely a trip. It was, for me, the whole time it was a learning experience. I had to learn how to perform as a musical theater person as opposed to a straight actor, which is what I thought my life was going to be. It was just going to be, I fancied myself very much like Raul Julia, and that time also the other people that I admired was like Robert De Niro, Pacino, and so forth. Those are the people that I grew up watching. I didn't have a lot of experience going to the theater because I didn't have access to that either. All I had was the television. And so one of my first loves is, West Side Story, Seven Brides and Seven Brothers, anything that I was able to watch on television. So that was my experience. And between Michael Greif, the cast, Jonathan, Tim Wilde, musical director, they gave me, it was a master class. I would have to say it was a master class in musical theater, but also very specific. And it wasn't really until the last 10 years that I really found an appreciation, a complete appreciation for musical theater as a whole, when I played Lancelot in Camelot in San Francisco Theater. I found this love, I really do love classical musical theater. I love that stuff. So if it weren't for that, I don't think that I'd be where I am today. I know that I wouldn't be where I am today because of it, and in every sense of the word, not just as far as career, but as far as being informed and appreciation of these things that otherwise I wouldn't be exposed to.
Now, not to wallow in the story that you must have told 450 million times, but we all know the story of Rent, where it was the final dress rehearsal for Off-Broadway of Rent. Mm-hmm. Did you get a phone call in the morning of the next performance, or was it after the show? When did you get the horrible news? And just take us through that day, as I'm sure you've done 4 billion times.
Okay, and this will be 1,000,000,001.
Yeah.
Like you said, we had our final dress rehearsal. It was our first, it was our first complete dress. For me, it was the first time that I think that I got that character right, because I was still trying to figure out where the character sat, and also within the whole environment of the show, and how to do it right, for lack of a better phrase, just how to get it right. And I felt that I finally got it right, and I felt like I was in it. I was in the zone. Larson was being interviewed by the New York Times, he looked just beyond happy. He looked very satisfied. Finally, his baby has actually materialized. Go home and thinking like, okay, tomorrow is the first preview, and I wake up to my phone ringing, and it's Jim Nicola, and he says, and he gives us the bad news. He gives me the bad news, and he says that Jonathan passed the night before. That apparently he went home, and the biggest famous story is he was making a pot of tea, and then he just died there on the spot. That was just not the best way to wake up. Not the best way.
Yeah.
It just wasn't. And of course, the question was, what are we going to do? But they asked all of us to go to the theater as soon as we all could. So we all went, and we were all just kind of, consoling each other and hugging each other and crying and asking questions. And so the big question was, obviously, what are we going to do? So it just became an invited first preview with all of the friends and family. We were doing it more like a stage reading with our scripts there, even though that we had everything committed to memory. But it was just going to be kind of like a very simple reading where we sang the songs, sort of like a concert version of it. And by the time that we got to La Viva Wem, Daphne, Ruben Vega, and I couldn't contain ourselves during the handcrafted beers portion of La Viva Wem, and we just completely cut loose. And we went into complete staging and choreography and blocking, and we just absolutely cut loose. So by the end of La Viva Wem, we all decided, all right, well, second act, we're definitely going to get into full costume. And so we got into full costume and finished off the show. It was definitely one of the most emotional nights that I could still, even to this day, that I can remember. After you hear the final, no day but today, and, I come out and I sit, and we have that nice little picture-perfect clump. There's no applause. There's just silence. And then someone from the back of the audience says, "Thank you, Jonathan Larson," which is a phrase that we took, and there was a nice little wooden plaque that would get taken around to all the touring cast as well, reminding ourselves, like, thank you, Jonathan Larson, this is why we're all here. And since then, we all became a lot more protective over the project itself, because in a sense, it was sort of unfinished because he was still working on it. Mm-hmm. He was still working on Act 2. So what was left and what couldn't be touched, we felt, okay, well, this, we did know what he wanted. We did know how he felt about it, and so we were super, super protective over that piece, and it galvanized us, and it stopped being acting by that point. It became real every single time for us, and we felt that it was essential. It was so important that we got the message out, that we got this project out, that we allow people to feel the same way that we were feeling, and it became much sharing. Yeah.
Were you worried as a group, and also you personally, that you wouldn't be able to replicate the experience at New York Theater Workshop when it moved to, I think it was the Nederlander Theater on Broadway, because now it's more seats, it's a different venue, a different context. Were you still worried about opening on Broadway?
My 24-year-old brain at that time was more concerned about getting it right. Just for me, just getting my performance right every single time. Because by that point, in that transition between off-Broadway and Broadway, we've already did it quite a bit of times, and they started to add shows, and every show was jam-packed. If anything, the weird thing was that the stage in New York Theater Workshop was bigger, at least wider, than the theater at the Nederlander. If anything, the Nederlander was just taller, much taller space. Yes, there was a lot of, this really isn't a testament to Michael Greif and his direction. He made sure that remind us of the adjustments that had to be made for a bigger house. So for me, the worry was never any less than it was off Broadway. And for me, I was I previously, when I was a dancer before I became an actor, I performed in Brazil for a sort of a pop group during the 80s. So I performed in front of large audiences before, so I was used to that. But I wasn't used to doing musical theater. So the audiences never really scared me at all. What scared me was, if anything, what scared me was disappointing my castmates and Michael Greif, and making sure that we just got it right. So by that point, it became like clockwork. It was just clockwork, just hitting it hard and making sure. It felt every single night that, for me, it felt like it was a dress rehearsal every single time, that it was an opportunity to make better adjustments, to improve on what we were doing, if anything, to make it more real. For me, it was just really making it all more real. And I remember always thinking as the character. That's the thing that always helped me, is to be in it, was to think as the character, to think as Angel, to go, all my inner thoughts were as Angel. There was no time to be afraid, because there was so much already on the line. I think that was all of us. If anything, we were so, it was shock. It was traumatic, all of it. You know, the combination of death, and along with the explosion of the show and the media attention after that. I mean, especially for me, I am a kid from Brooklyn, born and raised, never had that kind of attention before. I came from relative obscurity, and all of a sudden now everyone knows who I am. Everyone knows who I'm working with. Everyone knows what kind of project I'm working with. So I felt like I was part of this machine, that I had to be part of the cog. I was part of the wheel, and I had to go. So there was no room for fear. There was a task at hand, and we had to achieve it. And every night, that's what we did.
Well, the interesting thing is, I ask when I talk to actors who have been nominated for or won Tony Awards, I usually ask, how did that change your life, or did it change your life or your career? With you, it almost sounds like the Tony would have been an afterthought. It was Rent that changed everything. And, you happened to win a Tony. That didn't hurt, but you were already a name. You were already part of this iconic show. But I guess I will ask, did the Tony make a diff?
Yeah, it did. It absolutely made a diff, because, again, if anything, who knows? I just might have been that actor that you see everywhere doing a lot of off-Broadway shows or in the chorus of Broadway shows. I might have just been that if the show didn't open up also the diversity of casting as well. So it got my foot in the door. So, I went from being Wilson J. Heredia, who just does a couple of shows, to, Wilson Jermaine Heredia. Well, please come in the room, or absolutely we will see him.
But you don't have a ton of IBDB credits either. Your only other credit, as far as I've seen on Broadway, was that you came into the revival of La Cage aux Folles, the one, it had starred, I think, Kelsey Grammer and Douglas Hodge, but they left, and the new cast came in, and you came in, I think, with Harvey Fierstein. So, First of all, why don't you have more Broadway credits, do you think?
Because I think I'm a hard fit. I'm definitely a hard fit. And there just hasn't been a lot of projects that are perfect. I also honestly have to say that after initially winning the Tony, I was a bit spooked, because it's a very typical thing, is that you become your own worst enemy. I was trying to top myself constantly, and so there was always that anxiety. But I always preferred off-Broadway productions. But as much as now that I've fallen in love with musical theater, there isn't a lot of musical theater or a lot of shows that I would have wanted to be in. And I still was growing during that time, so I still wasn't prepared for musical theater, as it were. I needed to be more shows like Rent, but there weren't any more shows like it. On the other side also, life just got in the way as well, where there were just other things that I was focusing on. I was trying to work on a music career initially when I was in Rent, and I was sort of aiming more towards film and television, which is actually what I would love that right now. But for me, the first love is always the stage. So that's mainly the reasons why I don't have as many.
Because you have a few off-Broadway credits, and some IMDb stuff, but it's a little sporadic and spotty. I think you mentioned in another interview that at one point you kind of took a year off to find yourself, as it were.
Yeah, I did, because I was only part of that machine, part of the Rent machine. trying to create a happy medium between both of them. That's just a product of me growing through the whole process. And if anything, I'm getting a lot more credits now than I was before because I'm just more mature. I'm just more prepared. And I can tell you that there was still, I'm not afraid to say, there was a sense of immaturity to me at that time. There was.
Well, you were 25.
Like
I mean, you know.
Yeah, I was 20. Yeah, I was 24, and I just moved out of my parents' house prior to that, and then I moved back into my parents' house. And so when this happened, I was living with them. So there was that. There was living at home. So after a night of signing 100 autographs and all that, I went back to Williamsburg, Brooklyn. Back in my parents' house, and then there was did you shake out the garbage? There was all that. So
well, that should have kept you grounded, though. That's kind of a good thing in a way.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I always had a vision of what I wanted to do, and I'll tell you this: I'm not an actor that you'll see in Phantom of the Opera. You're not going to see me in Les Mis.
Wait, no, come on. There isn't that much difference between Phantom and Camelot. I mean, they're both old school. You shouldn't say that, because what makes you think you won't be a good either Phantom or Raoul?
Well, I could be, and definitely more now. Like I said, I have a lot more discipline than I had before when I was younger. The reason that I did Camelot was because in the San Francisco theater, well, actually in San Francisco in general, the casting is a lot more diverse, and I was surprised. Actually, I wasn't that excited, or I didn't think that it was a great idea for me to play Lancelot, just because I also was buying into the cultural stigmas and the limitations of what it is to be a person of color and play other roles that are not. And thank you, Lin-Manuel, for actually taking it to the next level, I have to say. But the director insisted, he's like, I think that you're perfect for it. I think that your energy is perfect for it, and I have a new vision. So they have a lot more diverse ideas, and ultimately their bottom line is never just to pack the houses, even though that's actually what keeps their theaters running. They're interested in experimenting and trying something new. Whereas Broadway, it's a business. But now that things are a lot more open as far as casting, then yes, now you can actually see a Wilson Jermaine Heredia in a Phantom now. I just didn't see it before.
Then, yeah.
Also, I wasn't a typical musical theater actor where I have to think, I would go to auditions and people have their book and they have all these, selection of songs. And I didn't do that because that's not what I trained myself to do. I trained myself to work on text, be present, be on time, which I had an issue with when I was younger. Again, it was all of those things.
And here's a question. Here's something that probably people are afraid to ask at this point. But your big show, Rent, you played Angel, a transvestite person. Your only other show on Broadway, you played a very flighty, effeminate, gay character in La Cage aux Folles. Do you think maybe on some level you were immediately typecasted? Oh, that's what he does. He plays gay people who flick around the stage.
Well, that's a very good question. That would be another reason why I didn't have as many theater credits, because I was so convincing as Angel that casting directors or producers didn't see me as anything else, and they were so moved by the performance that that's all they wanted to see. So there was a lot of me turning down a lot of stuff, and I was a person of that kind of integrity where I said, if I'm not going to be allowed to really expand on my talents and really grow and try different things, then I'm not going to do it. There was a lot of me saying no to a lot of things. These are projects that I wouldn't say necessarily that I had them, but just even the suggestion of the subject matter of drag queen and all that, I just wasn't interested in because I felt that I did it before. Playing Angel well wasn't a result of me knowing how to play a drag queen very well. It was a result of me learning how to play that character and developing with that character. So it isn't like I have these kind of characters in my back pocket. Everything, all characters that I play still take work. Even, playing Papi in Pedro Pan.
Did you do any research about Cuba for that?
Yeah. Well, there's the information that Rebecca, the writer, has given us, because this is based on her family story. So we always have that source of information constantly for that. With Angel, I was a club kid. If you remember what that was and what that is in New York City, I used to hang out in the Palladium when it was open before they turned it take a lot of my interpretation of Buffy. There's a lot of my dad in it. How my dad will also die for me and do anything for me, and that the most important thing is his family, no matter what. So I have that, and along with the stories that he's told me about how he came to this country and how difficult it was. So there isn't a lot of things that I need to read, but it always helps with certain specific things. But I'm a big history buff in general, so I do know a bit about the history of Cuba, and I was even there when I was in a workshop with Christopher Renshaw, who directed We Will Rock You, and I was actually the first Freddie Mercury when it was workshopped under the title Queen.
And go figure, you weren't typecast as, and there you were playing Freddie Mercury in a band called Queen. Yep, that does carry through.
I know.
Yeah. No, and the interesting thing, I don't know if it's ironic, but coincidentally, you are a straight guy, married, with a kid. How did you meet your wife, and what does she do?
Oh, my wife actually is a scientist, and now she works in sales, selling gene testing equipment to pharmaceutical companies. Yeah.
Oh, no, I wish I knew her, because I bought a pair of jeans, and they fell apart. 2 weeks I'm wearing them. It's amazing. So if she had tested my jeans properly, I could use that. If she's selling it, give me her number. I may want to buy one of those things.
I'll give you her card. Yeah.
So, but here's the deal. Wife, kid, you're an actor, and now you're doing more musical theater, which means you have to travel, plus you do have IMDb, movie and TV credits. How much time do you get to spend with the fam, and how much time do you have to be out there for a week or a month at a time away?
Well, not as much as you would think, but definitely after spending more and more time away from home. It's all about the priorities and what you put first. And ultimately, you have to remember why you're doing these things anyway to begin with. It's not just a selfish thing for me that I just want to be a star. I just want to be in the lights and all that. For me, it's about sharing and doing what I love to do also, what fulfills me and what I feel is sort of equivalent to being a doctor, whereas that I heal people's souls. I know it sounds corny, but that's how I feel about it. It took a long time for me to find a partner that was completely supportive of that, which is why, no offense out there to any other actors, but I just couldn't date actresses anymore because it was just a conflict of interest, and relationships are hard to begin with. So it was fantastic to meet someone that completely was supportive, but isn't necessarily in that line of work. So it was a nice balance. So for me, it's I remember that the important thing is, like, why am I doing this? I'm doing this actually to enrich our lives, and I'm working towards something. Before, it was when I was just a single kid doing it. You just do it. You sometimes you don't even know why you're doing it. You start something and you just go, and you go and go and go. With my wife, it truly gives me purpose, and I'm looking forward to having children and fulfilling my purpose even further.
We're talking with Wilson Jermaine Heredia. Just a couple more quick questions, because one of the other things I like to do with actors and performers who've been around a while is to say, oh, you worked with so-and-so. You worked with this person, that person. Do you have any cool stories? So we kind of glanced over that you were in La Cage when Harvey Fierstein was in there. Do you have any Harvey stories?
I can just say the first time that I met Harvey during the first table read, he said, "Come over here, Bubala. Come over here." And he's like, "You okay? You okay?" I was like, "Yeah, I'm good. I'm good." And I was just immediately taken in by how open and affectionate that he was. And so he was fantastic. The whole time he was fantastic.
Now, the difference between a show like Rent, where you were in it from the inception, to coming into La Cage aux Folles, actually you weren't just coming into a cast that was already there. The original people left, and you were there with Jeffrey Tambor and some other people playing Georges, but at the same time, you had to fit into a show that was already going, and maybe somebody else's costumes already, and the blocking was already done. Was that tough?
Yeah, it was very tough. It's very tough also because the energy was different. It was a different kind of show, and they weren't conveying the same message. They already had the actors that stayed behind, the performers that stayed behind, they already had their acquaintances, their cliques. There was already an energy that I had to try to fit in to, and by that point it was over 10, 11, I would say like 11 everything that I worked on was something that I worked with in its inception.
Right.
So for me, it was very hard to actually kind of go in and just try to fit in because I had other things with Jeffrey Tambor and his energy and working with Harvey. It was just, I have to say that it was definitely one of the most challenging times in my career, but I'm glad that I've had the experience because I'm wiser for it now, and I know exactly what to do in a situation like that and how to approach it. It's all really about adjusting and part of the growth of an actor in general. Again, I came into this very late. This kind of, I mean, I'm pretty sure that there are people there that have been doing musicals forever. I was still learning how to use those kind of musicals and like, oh, okay, this is the way we do it. Yeah.
A musical that was closer to the Rent style. You worked with one of our premier directors, Diane Paulus, on a show called Eli's Coming, based on the music of Laura Nero. Do you have any memories of working with her?
God, all my memories are fresh as though they were yesterday with everything that I've worked on. Diana Paulus is very much, even from what I understand now, as she was then, she's very much a collaborator. She collaborates with her actors, and it isn't like she just tells you, I want you to stand here and say things and say this in this particular way, or this is the way that you're supposed to be feeling. She's very much about exploring, so I appreciated that about her a lot. And also, she kind of reminded me a little bit of Liz Swados. Liz Swados is more about, like, we all creating the piece together, whereas with her, it was, especially my role was actually a lot smaller than the other girls that were singing. It was almost like being in a voice and movement class, she would say, like, how is it that you would feel during this? And yes, you're supposed to be this kind of Mephistopheles character, and so why don't we just play around? And so for an off-Broadway production, coming from something that's a lot more regimented, like Rent, where there's at this particular time you're supposed to be here, you're supposed to be here, it was an adjustment for me to have someone say, like, tell me what you want, or tell me, show me how you feel, and let's try this. And there were some blocking that was set in stone, and other things that were subject to emotional interpretation based on the night. And she was just, I have to say, one of the sweetest people that I've met in that position. And her and I met before, also when I was auditioning for some MTV project, so it was just nice that there was a familiar face.
You also mentioned, it's funny you mentioned Mephistopheles, because I'm going to throw this one at you. One of your IMDb credits is that you played Satan in a movie called Bleeding Hearts, featuring, get this, Robert Loggia, Charles Durning, and Dustin Diamond from Saved by the Bell. Do you have any memories of working on that movie?
Yeah, well, Dustin Diamond wasn't there when I was shooting, but it was a blast. Well, my Satan character was the reason that they wanted me for this was because they wanted a Satan that was sort of like in drag.
There we go. I'm sorry. Okay, I get it. Yeah.
Yeah, it was one of those. It was a lot more about just having, it was one day of shooting for me. It was one day shoot, a very long day of shooting. It was 2 days. If you see the film, it was just havoc. It was fantastic, organized chaos. It was just a lot of fun.
And any memories of Charles Durning?
Yeah, man. Yeah. He just had the greatest stories, and it's always great to be around those kind of personalities that have been doing it forever, and you can just feel the weight of their history and their experience. I remember this one joke, see if I can remember it.
Oh, boy.
This is the one joke I do remember. He says, like, why is a horse better to date than a woman?
Why is a horse better to date than a woman? Why?
Because after you're done with the date, you get a ride home.
Oh, my God. Yeah. That's one for the Me Too movement. Okay, good.
Yeah. That's the joke. It's funny. The moment you mentioned his name, it was like, yes, the joke. I remember that. It's just his delivery, too. His delivery was like, because when you're done with the date, you get a ride home. It was just, it's fantastic.
Well, it has been fantastic talking to Wilson Jermaine Heredia. Now, I've been talking to him, but you can go see him in the play Pedro Pan. It is running July 10th through the 14th at the Acorn Theater, which is on Theater Row. It's real simple to get to. It's between 8th and 9th Avenue on 42nd Street. There's a ton of restaurants there, too, and you can see this story about a Cuban child and the Poppy, which he plays. Yeah, I've got one last question for you. I pulled that Satan thing out of your IMDb credits, but if you could pick a TV show or a movie that you were in, that, not Rent, something that's really lesser known, but that you're proud of, that you look back on, I wish more people had seen that or could watch that on Netflix or rent it, what might that role be?
Oh, yeah, I have it right on top of my head. It's this musical called Court Victory that I did at the Williamstown Theater Festival. It was a lot of fun. It was basically Alice in Wonderland set in the quantum world, where I played an electron, and because I was an electron, always negative. And, of course, there was these other characters, which I was with. Sterling Brown was in that show with me. So was Charlie Day, and so was Jimmy Simpson. It was just one of those shows where after that, they all just blew up and branched out. It was a lot of fun, and I really wished that more people got to see that, and because it was a really good show. And the choreographer was Andy Blankenbuehler.
Oh, wow.
As well. So,
the guy who went to do Hamilton, yeah.
Exactly, exactly. That was just one of those shows that I felt never really got off the ground. It just stayed at the Williamstown Theater Festival and wasn't seen again, as far as I know. But I definitely could have seen that as one of those family-friendly shows that people would have left with just smiles, just smiles. But essentially, that's what the story was. It was Alice in Wonderland set in the quantum world. Afterwards, obviously, Dorothy gets back to regular size. and
Not Dorothy, Alice.
Yes, Alice.
You're mixing your fantasies there. She follows the yellow brick road through the universe. Is kind of an interesting... No, I'm kidding. But I am smiling like the most positive proton right now talking to Wilson Jermaine Heredia. It just remains to me to say thank you. It's been a delight talking to you. I wish you much more musical theater of all different types and all the kind of work that you want to do. It has been a delight, and shalom to you.
Shalom to you, too. Thank